Somewhere right now, a guy with a good day job is doing math on his phone. 1,000 people, $40 a head at the door. A bar stocked with vodka that costs him $4 a bottle and sells for $200. In his head, a nightclub is the cleanest business on earth. No inventory rotting on a shelf, no customers haggling over price. Just a room, a DJ, and a line stretching around the block on a Friday night. He's not wrong about the markup. He's wrong about who actually owns what happens inside that room. Because on opening night, the person filling that club isn't going to be him. It's going to be someone else's guest list, someone else's phone number, someone else's relationship with the exact people willing to spend real money. And that someone else can walk out the door tomorrow and take Saturday night with him. Here's what nobody tells you before you sign the lease. You can spend $2 million and still not be allowed to open the doors. In most markets, a real nightclub build runs anywhere from $250,000 to well past $2 million, depending on size, location, and how serious the production gets. Renovation alone is usually the single biggest line item, often around $300,000. Behind it, entertainment equipment can run another $200,000. Sound systems, closer to $150,000. Furniture and decor, $120,000. Lighting, another $100,000 on top of that. None of it is optional, either. Take away any one of those pieces, and the room stops looking like the version you promised on the invitation. That's the visible cost. It's not the scary part. The scary part is the permission. In states with tight liquor license quotas, California, New Jersey, a handful of others, the government isn't just selling you a piece of paper. It's selling access to a locked room, and there are only so many seats at the table. When demand outstrips supply, licenses trade on the secondary market for over $400,000. Read that again. Not the building, not the sound system. The license, $400,000, before you've poured a single drink. And even where the fee itself is reasonable, some jurisdictions charge as little as $15,000 in direct government fees. The wait rarely is. Some cities take 3 to 6 months to process a full application. Others take longer, sometimes stretching past half a year if there's a hearing involved or a neighborhood objects. Every one of those months, the lease clock keeps running whether you're open or not, which means you're paying full rent on a room that isn't legally allowed to serve a single drink yet. That's how a founder ends up needing over $700,000 in cash by month 2. Before opening night, before a single paying guest walks through the door, just to cover deposits, build out, opening liquor inventory, and rent on a room that legally can't serve anyone yet. Some landlords have caught on to this pattern too. They won't even finalize your lease until you can prove a license is on the way. Which means the actual first move in this business isn't picking a location or booking a headliner. It's convincing a bureaucrat, months in advance, that you deserve to exist at all. Say you clear that hurdle. You're open, you're licensed, and now the real business begins. Except it's not one business. It's 5, stacked on top of each other, and only one of them makes real money. Start at the door. The cover charge is the smallest number in the building. $20, $40, sometimes free before 11, and it was never designed to be profitable. Its job is triage. It filters 1,000 strangers down into the crowd you actually want inside, and most nights it barely covers the security staff standing next to it. If the cover charge is the only thing keeping your lights on, you don't have a nightclub. You have a cover band. One level up sits the rail bar, where regular people order regular drinks at regular, if inflated, prices. This is the steady hum underneath everything else, reliable, and also a little boring from a margin standpoint, because it scales one drink at a time, one bartender at a time, one slow Tuesday at a time. Liquor at the rail is usually priced, so the pour costs somewhere around 15 to 20% of what it sells for. Solid math. Not the math that built the mansion. Climb one more level, and you reach the room that actually pays the rent. Bottle service is where the real economics of a nightclub live, and the numbers sound almost fictional until you see them written down. A bottle that costs the club $20 or $40 wholesale gets sold across a VIP table for $500 minimum, sometimes far more, and the markup routinely clears 1,000%. In cities built around nightlife, Las Vegas, Miami, bottle service isn't a side offering. On a peak Saturday, it can generate 70 to 80% of everything the club takes in that night, not 70 to 80% of the VIP section. 70 to 80% of the entire building's revenue, funneled through maybe a dozen tables tucked into one corner of the room. Sit with that contrast for a second. A guy at the rail bar nurses a $12 cocktail for 20 minutes. 15 feet away, a table orders its second bottle before the first one's empty. And that single order outperforms an hour of rail bar sales from the rest of the room combined. Zoom out, and the same imbalance shows up in the property numbers too. Top clubs can pull $15 to $25 in revenue per square foot every month, and VIP tables alone are often responsible for up to 30% of that total, from a section that might take up a fraction of the actual floor space. So naturally, you'd think, fill every table, every night, and you're printing money. Except here's the part that should worry you. The club doesn't fill those tables. Someone else does. They're called promoters, and they don't work for the nightclub the way a bartender or a doorman does. A promoter brings his own list, his own contacts, his own group chat of people with money who trust him, not the venue, and in exchange, he takes a cut of whatever his tables spend, often 20 to 30% or more off the top. On paper, that looks like a smart arrangement. The club gets a full room without hiring a sales team. The promoter gets paid for his Rolodex. Everyone wins. But look closer at what actually happened in that handshake. The club just handed its single most profitable revenue stream, the one generating 70 to 80% of a Saturday night, to somebody who doesn't own the building, doesn't sign the lease, and isn't on the hook for a single dollar of rent. He works nights at multiple clubs sometimes in the same week, comparing commission splits like a free agent comparing contract offers. The nightclub owner, meanwhile, is locked into that lease for years. Remember what you were told at the start. You don't own the party. You're renting it. This is what that actually means, in dollars. The promoter can take his list to the club 2 blocks over next month for a better cut or a better DJ, or just because he felt like it, and he owes your business nothing when he goes. The tables he used to fill sit empty. The fixed costs sitting underneath those tables, rent, staff, insurance, don't go anywhere. Only the revenue does. That's not a hypothetical risk buried in some appendix of a business plan. It's the central, structural fact of how most nightclubs actually generate income. Hold on to it, because it's about to explain how a famous, packed, fully booked nightclub ends up in bankruptcy court within a single year. One more layer first, because it's the one that barely existed a decade ago and now quietly props up the whole model. Content. A well-designed bottle service moment, sparklers, an LED presenter, a server making an entrance through the crowd. Isn't really about the champagne anymore. It's built to be filmed. Every table that gets photographed and posted becomes a small advertisement for the next table, seen by exactly the audience that can afford to buy one. In a strange way, the guest isn't just a customer at that point. He's an unpaid marketing department, doing the club's advertising for free, one story post at a time, and the club never has to write a check for it. Add in private buyouts for brand launches, daytime pool, or rooftop crossovers, and a corporate party that rents the whole room for a flat fee, and you've got a fifth income stream that barely cost anything to build beyond a strong Instagram presence and a charged LED battery. Stack it all together. A cover charge that barely breaks even. A rail bar that keeps the lights on. A bottle service program that generates most of the real money, run by people the club doesn't employ and can't fully control. And a layer of content and private events amplifying whichever tables show up to be seen. It looks like 5 revenue streams. It behaves like one revenue stream wearing 4 disguises, and that one stream is on loan. Now here's the mechanism. Here's exactly how a business that looks like it prints money on Saturday can be dead by spring. Start with the fixed costs, because they don't care what night of the week it is. Rent doesn't drop on a Tuesday. Insurance doesn't pause because the room's half empty. Security still has to be staffed whether 200 people show up or 2,000. Add it all together, and a mid-sized nightclub is often carrying somewhere around $160,000 to $170,000 a month in overhead in year one, before the business has proven anything to anyone. Almost none of that overhead gets paid by 7 nights of business. It gets paid by 2, maybe 3. Thursday, Friday, Saturday carry the entire month. Sunday through Wednesday exist mostly to keep the staff employed and the lights technically on. So the real question a nightclub owner answers every single week isn't, how do we make money? It's, can 3 nights cover 30 days of bills? And remember who's actually filling those 3 seats, not the club, the promoters. Here's where the trap closes. A promoter can leave for a better split at the club down the street with 0 notice and 0 cost to himself. He doesn't hold a lease, doesn't owe a landlord, doesn't have security staff on payroll. When he goes, he doesn't take a slice of Saturday's revenue with him. In a room built around bottle service, he can take most of it. A Saturday that should have generated $200,000 can quietly generate 20. Same room, same staff on the clock. 1/10 the money coming through the door, and the fixed costs sitting underneath that Saturday don't shrink by a single dollar just because the tables are empty. That's the first domino. Here's the second, and it's worse. Because it's not even about people leaving. It's about paperwork. Remember that liquor license, the one that can cost more than the building itself in a quota state? That license isn't just a permit to sell drinks. In a lot of these deals, it functions as collateral. Lenders price it into the loan. Landlords price it into the lease. Financially, it behaves less like a piece of paper and more like real estate. Which means when a license gets suspended, a health violation, an incident on the floor, a missed inspection deadline, doesn't matter what, the damage isn't, we lose a weekend of sales. The damage is that an asset the bank was counting on just lost most of its value. At the exact moment, the club still owes that bank a payment on a building generating 0 revenue instead of merely less revenue. And this is the piece almost nobody plans for. The bills don't pause during a suspension. Rent doesn't take a month off while you wait on a re-inspection. The loan doesn't restructure itself just because the room went dark. Every fixed cost that was barely being covered by 3 good nights a week keeps compounding against a business that, for however many weeks this drags on, has 3 nights of literally nothing. Run the sequence all the way through, and you can see exactly how a nightclub with famous DJs on its resume and a packed room 6 months earlier ends up in bankruptcy court. One trigger, a defecting promoter, a lapsed inspection, one bad incident that makes headlines, removes the 2 or 3 nights actually paying the bills. The fixed costs underneath don't move. The license, now worth less or suspended outright, stops functioning as collateral right when the lender needs it most. Landlord and lender both run out of patience around the same time because they're both staring at the same math. What started as a single bad week becomes a forced filing. Months later, that has almost nothing to do with whether people liked the club. This is the part the naive version of this business never accounts for. It's not a room with high margins and some risk attached. It's a room with high margins rented out weekly to people who can leave, sitting on top of fixed costs that never leave, backed by a license that only holds its value as long as nothing goes wrong. Every other retail business gets to build up a cushion over a slow month. A nightclub barely gets a cushion over a slow week. Nothing has to go wrong for very long. Theory is one thing. Here's what it actually looks like when the math catches up with a real building. Start quiet, because this first case is the trap almost nobody sees coming. In downtown Las Vegas, inside the city center resort complex, there was a nightclub called Beso, part owned by actress Eva Longoria. It opened with the kind of attention most new clubs would kill for: a recognizable name attached, a resort address, the built-in foot traffic of a strip-adjacent property. On paper, Beso was working. The club pulled in $14.6 million in revenue in a single year. $14 million. If revenue were the whole story, this would be a success story, full stop. It wasn't. Despite that top line, Beso was losing $76,000 every single month. The club filed for bankruptcy, owing almost $5.7 million, including $1.8 million in unpaid rent to its own landlord. Longoria herself had personally loaned the business $1 million and covered another $375,000 in legal fees just trying to keep it upright. Read that again. $14.6 million walked through the door in a year, and the club still couldn't cover rent. This is the fixed cost trap from the inside. It doesn't matter how much money crosses the bar if the number sitting underneath it is bigger than what's left after everyone gets paid. Beso didn't fail because nobody showed up. It failed because showing up was never going to be enough. Now scale that same mechanism up to a room most of the industry considered untouchable. In Brooklyn, an open-air venue called the Mirage opened in 2017 under a company called Avant Gardner. It wasn't one room, either. The complex grew into a small campus of connected spaces, built specifically to host the kind of names that draw ticket buyers from outside the city entirely. Drake played there. So did David Guetta. So did Tiesto. At the start of 2023, DJ Magazine ranked it among the top 100 nightclubs in the entire country, a list most venues never come close to. By every visible measure, the bookings, the ranking, the crowds, this was a club that had made it, the kind of operation that looked, from the outside, completely bulletproof. Then the paperwork caught up with it. The venue missed the timeline on an annual inspection deadline, and the city simply wouldn't let it operate. Not a scandal, not a shooting, not a loss of popularity, a missed inspection window. And because the license and the operating approval functioned as collateral, the way we described a minute ago, that single administrative failure didn't just cost Avant Gardner a few weekends of revenue. It froze the company's ability to open its newly built Mirage space for the entire 2025 season. Once the peak nights stopped, the fixed costs kept running exactly the way we said they would. Rent didn't pause. Debt didn't pause. Within months, the company filed for Chapter 11, listing debts north of $155 million. The building itself, 32,000 square feet, that once held some of the biggest names in music, now sits under a demolition permit at an estimated cost of over $1.5 million just to tear it down. Put these two side by side, and the pattern is unmistakable. Biso had genuine revenue and still couldn't survive its fixed costs. The Mirage had genuine fame, genuine bookings, a top 100 ranking, and one missed government deadline was enough to take down a $155 million operation. Neither club failed because people stopped wanting to go. Both failed because the thing propping up the business, rent in one case, a license in the other, turned out to be load-bearing in a way nobody budgeted for until it gave out. That's not two unlucky businesses. That's the same structural trap, wearing two different outfits, taking down a small room in a resort and a 32,000 square foot flagship with equal indifference. So which nightclub do you actually end up owning? That depends entirely on how many of these traps you saw coming before you signed anything. The best case version of this business is real, and it's not a fantasy. It belongs to the owner who treats the liquor license like the asset it actually is. Insured, monitored, never allowed to drift toward a missed deadline. It belongs to the owner who builds relationships with 2 or 3 promoters instead of betting the whole room on one, so that when somebody inevitably walks, Saturday still happens. It belongs to the owner who sizes the fixed costs to a realistic average week, not to the best Saturday of opening month. Run it that way, and the bottle service math from earlier is completely real. 1,000% markup on a bottle of vodka is not an exaggeration. It's genuinely one of the highest margin transactions in hospitality, when the structure underneath it is sound. The worst-case version is the exact same room, same lease, same DJ booth, same velvet rope. The only difference is timing. A promoter takes a better offer the same month an inspector flags a violation, and 2 of the 3 nights that were covering 30 days of rent are suddenly gone at once. Biso had the revenue and still lost the building. The Mirage had the fame and still lost the building. Nothing about the room changes between those 2 outcomes. Only the sequence of a few bad weeks does. Which brings us back to where we started. The guy on his phone, doing math on vodka markups. Certain he's found the cleanest business in hospitality. He's not being foolish. Every number he's looking at is real. The 1,000% markup is real. The packed room on a Saturday is real. What's missing from his phone isn't a number at all. It's a question nobody puts in the spreadsheet. Who actually controls whether that room fills up next month? And what happens to the rent if they stop? He wasn't wrong about the profit. He was wrong about who's holding it. Because the truth is, nobody actually owns a nightclub. They own a lease, a license that can evaporate in a single missed deadline, and a debt that keeps compounding whether the room is full or dark. The party, the actual thing people are paying $500 a bottle to be part of, was never the club's to keep. It was only ever on loan.